Hey, look what we got here. Another wannabe princess playing dress-up. Commander Titan, Grimwood's voice boomed across the cantina like a gunshot, causing every conversation at the anchor bar to suddenly fall silent. Bottles stopped clinking, chairs ceased scraping against the floor. Every eye turned toward the entrance where Ember Blackwood had just stepped inside. She was small in her military green t-shirt with its deep V-neck, dark army pants hugging her athletic frame, worn brown combat boots that had seen countless battles. Her long neon blue hair contrasted sharply with fair porcelain skin and defined cheekbones. But what made Grimwood grin maliciously was the SEAL gear she was carrying. Tactical vest, specialized equipment that, according to him, she didn't deserve. "Sweetheart, that gear costs more than your monthly paycheck," Grimwood continued, his massive 6'4" frame and camo uniform approaching with predatory confidence. "Where'd you steal it from? eBay? Some pawn shop?" Laughter erupted from his crew, rough, harsh sounds echoing off cantina walls. Ember didn't flinch. She walked calmly to the bar counter, ordered a coffee with a voice barely above a whisper. Her stance was perfectly balanced, shoulders relaxed but ready. Subtle signs that trained eyes would recognize, if anyone bothered to look beyond the surface. "I'm talking to you, princess," Grimwood slammed his beer bottle down. "Real SEALs earn their gear through blood and sacrifice. You're just another stolen valor fraud making real warriors look bad." What they didn't know was that in the next 20 minutes, every assumption in this room would crumble. What they were about to discover about Ember Blackwood would change everything they thought they knew about true strength and hidden identity. The cantina fell into an uncomfortable silence, broken only by the hum of air conditioning and distant sounds of the naval base beyond these walls. Ember's fingers wrapped around the coffee mug with deliberate precision, her grip neither too tight nor too loose. The bartender, a grizzled petty officer named Murphy with 20 years of service etched into his weathered face, noticed something most others missed. The way she positioned herself with clear sight lines to all exits, the subtle scan of potential threats, the muscle memory of someone who had learned survival in places where mistakes meant death. Grimwood's crew closed ranks behind him, 5 men whose collective presence filled the space with testosterone and aggression. Petty Officer Reed flexed his shoulders, Master Sergeant Walsh cracked his knuckles, and Seaman Torres shifted his weight from foot to foot like a fighter warming up for a bout. They had done this dance before, the ritual humiliation of those they deemed unworthy to share their space, their brotherhood, their carefully guarded sense of superiority. But Ember remained motionless, steam rising from her coffee cup like incense in a church, her blue eyes reflecting the overhead lights with an intensity that made Murphy uneasy. He had served on 3 deployments, had seen combat in Afghanistan and Iraq, had watched men break under pressure and others rise to moments that defined their entire lives. Something about this small woman triggered his instincts in ways he couldn't quite articulate. The cantina door swung open again, admitting Lieutenant Cassidy Vale, whose arrival shifted the dynamics in ways both subtle and profound. Vale was the rare female officer who had not only survived but thrived in this male-dominated environment, her success built on a foundation of calculated cruelty toward other women who threatened her carefully constructed position. She assessed the situation with predatory intelligence, immediately recognizing an opportunity to reinforce her status by participating in the destruction of a potential rival. "Well, well," Vale's voice carried across the room, with the precision of a blade finding its target. "Another little girl who thinks wearing the uniform makes her one of us." Her approach was different from Grimwood's brute force approach, more subtle, more psychological, designed to isolate and undermine rather than simply overwhelm. Ember's response was to take another sip of coffee, her movements so controlled they seemed choreographed. The cup returned to the bar with absolute silence. No clink of ceramic against wood, no splash of liquid. Murphy found himself holding his breath, watching this small woman with growing fascination and concern. "You know what I think?" Vale continued, positioning herself where she could address both Ember and the growing crowd of spectators. "I think we're looking at someone who bought that gear online, practiced some moves from YouTube videos, and decided to play soldier for the day. What do you think, boys?" The crowd's laughter had an uglier edge now, feeding off Vale's psychological precision. But Ember's posture remained unchanged, her breathing steady, her eyes focused on some point in the distance that only she could see. The contrast between her apparent vulnerability and her absolute stillness created a tension that made several observers shift uncomfortably. Grimwood sensed the moment slipping away from him, his authority challenged by Vale's more sophisticated approach. "Answer the lady, princess," he growled, moving closer until his shadow fell across Ember's small frame. "Tell us all about your illustrious military career. What's your MOS? Where did you serve? What unit?" If this story of underestimation and hidden strength resonates with you, smash that like button right now. Share this video with someone who's ever been judged by their appearance. The revelation coming next will blow your mind. You won't want to miss what happens when the truth finally comes out. Ember finally turned, her movement so fluid it seemed effortless, and looked directly at Grimwood. Her green eyes held his gaze with an intensity that made him want to step back, though his pride wouldn't allow such a retreat. When she spoke, her voice was quiet, but carried to every corner of the now silent bar. "I was asked to leave my gear in the locker," she said simply. "I chose not to." The words hung in the air like a challenge, their simplicity somehow more threatening than any elaborate explanation. Vale's eyes narrowed, recognizing something in those words that suggested layers of meaning beyond their surface appearance. Grimwood blinked, momentarily confused by a response that didn't fit any category in his mental playbook for dealing with frauds and wannabes. "That's not an answer," Vale pressed, her voice sharp with irritation. "We asked about your service record, your qualifications, your right to wear gear that belongs to America's elite warriors." Ember's response was to reach for her coffee again, but this time Murphy noticed something that made his pulse quicken. The way her fingers moved, the precise control, the absolute confidence. He had seen those movements before, in operators who had trained for thousands of hours until every action became automatic, instinctive, perfect. From across the cantina, Chief Warrant Officer Knox had been watching the confrontation with growing interest. 25 years of military service had given him an eye for details others missed, and what he was seeing didn't add up. The woman's posture was wrong for a civilian, her awareness too acute, her responses too controlled. Something about her equipment caught his attention as well, gear that looked standard at first glance but revealed subtle modifications upon closer inspection. Knox approached the group with the measured gait of someone accustomed to command, his presence immediately altering the dynamics of the confrontation. "Mind if I take a look at that equipment?" he asked, his tone carrying the authority of rank and experience. Ember nodded once, a gesture so slight it was barely perceptible, and stepped aside to allow Knox access to her gear. What happened next would be replayed in the minds of everyone present for years to come. Knox's examination was thorough and professional, his trained eye cataloging details that revealed a story none of them were prepared to hear. "This isn't standard issue," Knox murmured, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "These modifications, where did you get this?" The tactical vest showed signs of customization that spoke of specialized training and operational experience. The radio equipment included frequencies that weren't available to civilian personnel. The knife's blade showed wear patterns consistent with extensive field use. But it was the small details that truly caught Knox's attention. A compass bearing scratches from desert sand, a water purification system that had seen hard use, equipment arranged with the kind of systematic precision that came from muscle memory, developed under life-or-death conditions. "Answer the chief," Grimwood demanded, his voice rising with frustration. The confrontation wasn't proceeding according to his expectations, and the growing uncertainty in the room was undermining his authority. Ember's response was to demonstrate rather than explain. Knox had been examining a piece of communication equipment, trying to identify its specifications, when Ember quietly reached over and activated it with a series of button presses that were too rapid and precise to be anything but automatic. The device immediately synchronized with base communications, displaying security protocols that made Knox's eyes widen with recognition and alarm. "How do you know those codes?" Knox asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The question hung in the air like smoke from a battlefield, carrying implications that began to shift the entire atmosphere of the cantina. Vale stepped closer, her predatory instincts sensing weakness but unsure of its source. Grimwood flexed his hands, caught between aggression and growing uncertainty. Murphy continued polishing glasses with mechanical precision, but his attention was entirely focused on the small woman whose presence was beginning to feel like the calm before a storm. From the far corner of the cantina, Seaman Colt Winchester had been watching the confrontation with growing discomfort. Unlike the others, his objection wasn't to Ember's presence, but to the pack mentality that was developing around her isolation. Winchester had grown up in a small town where he had seen what happened when groups turned against individuals, and something about Ember's quiet dignity reminded him of his younger sister, facing down school bullies with the same kind of controlled courage. Advanced tactical communication systems used by special operations required encryption capabilities that exceeded civilian standards. Military-grade secure devices provided quantum-encrypted transmission protocols essential for classified operations. These specialized communication platforms included biometric authentication, location masking technology, and emergency extraction coordination that would be critical for personnel operating in sensitive environments where standard civilian devices would be completely inadequate for operational security requirements. Knox's examination of Ember's equipment was becoming more detailed and more troubling with each discovery. Her backpack contained items that weren't available through normal military supply channels. Her boots showed wear patterns consistent with extensive marching over varied terrain. Her gloves bore stains that could have come from weapons cleaning or field maintenance, but it was the small notebook he discovered in a side pocket that truly captured his attention. The notebook's pages contained handwritten notes in a cipher that Knox recognized but couldn't decode. The writing was precise, economical, with abbreviations and symbols that spoke of formal training in operational security. Scattered throughout were tactical sketches, equipment diagrams, and what appeared to be mission planning notes. The paper itself was weather-resistant, designed to survive harsh environmental conditions. "Where did you get this?" Knox asked, holding up the notebook. Ember's answer was silence, but her eyes met his with a directness that made him step back involuntarily. The look wasn't defiant or fearful. It was the look of someone weighing options, calculating risks, making decisions based on criteria the rest of them couldn't understand. Vale sensed an opportunity in Knox's obvious confusion. "Probably downloaded those codes from some hacker website," she suggested, her voice carrying just enough doubt to plant seeds of uncertainty. "Anyone can buy military surplus gear and learn a few radio frequencies. It doesn't make you special forces." But Knox's expression suggested otherwise. His 25 years of experience included time with classified programs, exposure to operational security protocols, and familiarity with the kind of equipment and procedures that existed in the shadowy margins of military operations. What he was seeing challenged his assumptions about who this woman was and what she represented. Grimwood's frustration was reaching a boiling point. The confrontation that should have been a simple matter of exposing a fraud was becoming increasingly complex and uncomfortable. His authority, built on years of successful intimidation, was being undermined by questions he couldn't answer and implications he didn't understand. "I don't care what kind of gear she's carrying," Grimwood declared, his voice carrying across the cantina with renewed aggression. "Real operators earn their credentials through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. They prove themselves in combat under fire when everything is on the line. What have you done, Princess? What battles have you fought? What have you sacrificed?" The questions hit the air like artillery shells, each one designed to expose weakness and force capitulation. But Ember's response was unexpected and deeply unsettling. Instead of defending herself or providing the explanations they demanded, she smiled, an expression so slight it was barely visible, but carried implications that made Murphy's hand freeze halfway to a glass. "You want to know about sacrifice?" Ember asked, her voice still quiet but now carrying undertones that hadn't been there before. "About blood in combat and proving yourself when everything is on the line?" The cantina fell completely silent. Even the background hum of air conditioning seemed to fade as every person present focused on the small woman whose presence was beginning to feel like a gathering storm. Knox's hand moved instinctively toward his radio, though he couldn't articulate why. Vale's predatory confidence wavered for the first time since her arrival. Winchester leaned forward in his chair, sensing that something significant was about to happen. "This tension is building to something incredible. Hit subscribe and ring that notification bell, because what you're about to witness will change everything. The moment of truth is approaching fast." Ember's response came not in words but in action. Knox had been holding her knife, examining its construction and wear patterns, when she extended her hand in a gesture that was neither demanding nor pleading, but somehow managed to communicate absolute authority. When Knox hesitated, she added quietly, "May I?" The transfer of the blade from Knox's hands to Ember's revealed something that made several observers step back involuntarily. The weapon moved in her grip like it was returning home, settling into a position that spoke of thousands of hours of training and operational use. Her fingers found their proper placement without conscious thought. Her stance shifted subtly to accommodate the blade's weight and balance. And for just a moment, everyone present saw past the small woman in civilian clothes to glimpse something far more dangerous underneath. The demonstration lasted perhaps 10 seconds. Ember simply held the knife, allowing them to see how it belonged in her hands, how her entire posture changed to accommodate its presence, how the weapon became an extension of her body rather than an external tool. Then she reversed it with a movement so fluid it seemed like choreography, offering the handle back to Knox with the same quiet authority she had used to request it. Knox accepted the blade with hands that trembled slightly, his eyes wide with recognition of something he couldn't quite name. Vale's mouth had fallen open, her carefully constructed facade cracking to reveal uncertainty and growing alarm. Grimwood stared at Ember with an expression that mixed confusion with the first stirrings of genuine concern. But it was Murphy who voiced what several of them were thinking. "Where did you learn to handle a blade like that?" he asked, his question cutting through the silence like the weapon they had just witnessed. Ember's answer was to take another sip of coffee, her movement so controlled it seemed to mock the chaos of emotions swirling around her. When she set the cup down, the silence was complete and absolute, broken only by the distant sounds of base operations continuing their normal routine, in a world that suddenly felt far removed from the confrontation unfolding in this small cantina. The tension was becoming unbearable when the cantina door opened to admit a figure whose presence immediately shifted every dynamic in the room. Senior Chief Petty Officer Ridge Thornfield entered with the bearing of someone who had earned respect through decades of exemplary service, his eyes immediately taking in the confrontation with the kind of tactical assessment that came from years of leadership in challenging environments. Thornfield's gaze swept the room, cataloging the positions and postures of everyone present, before settling on Ember with an intensity that made Vale step back involuntarily. His examination was brief but thorough, taking in her equipment, her stance, her absolute stillness in the center of a storm she hadn't created but wasn't retreating from. "What's the situation here?" Thornfield asked, his voice carrying the authority of rank and experience. Grimwood immediately launched into his explanation, describing Ember as a fraud, attempting to claim credentials she hadn't earned, wearing gear she had no right to possess, violating the sacred trust between genuine warriors and the symbols of their sacrifice. His words poured out in a torrent of indignation and wounded pride, painting Ember as a threat to everything they held sacred. But Thornfield's attention wasn't on Grimwood's passionate speech. Instead, he was watching Ember's reactions, noting the way she held herself under pressure, the controlled breathing, the alert stillness that spoke of training that went far beyond basic military instruction. When Grimwood finished his indictment, Thornfield asked a single question that changed everything. "What's your rate?" he asked Ember directly. The question was simple, direct, the kind of inquiry that would trip up any fraud attempting to impersonate military personnel. But Ember's response revealed layers of complexity that no one in the room was prepared to handle. "That information is classified," she said simply. The words fell into the silence like stones into still water, creating ripples of implication that spread outward to touch everyone present. Vale's face went pale. Knox's hand moved toward his radio again. Grimwood's mouth opened and closed without producing sound. Winchester leaned forward with growing excitement, sensing that his instincts about this woman were about to be vindicated in ways he couldn't imagine. Thornfield's reaction was the most significant of all. His posture straightened to attention, his eyes narrowed with recognition of implications that escaped the others, and his hand moved in an aborted gesture toward what might have been a salute before training and protocol reasserted control. "Classified," he repeated, the word carrying weight that pressed down on the room like atmospheric pressure before a storm. Ember nodded once, the gesture carrying finality that suggested the conversation had reached boundaries that couldn't be crossed without authorization she wasn't prepared to provide. But the damage was already done. The word classified had opened doors in the minds of everyone present, doors that led to questions about programs that existed in the shadows of official military operations, about personnel whose very existence was protected by security classifications that most service members would never possess clearance to access. Knox was the first to understand the implications. His 25 years of service had included exposure to the edges of the intelligence community, brief glimpses of operations that existed beyond normal military command structures. The equipment modifications he had noticed, the communication codes Ember had accessed, the way she moved and held herself. Suddenly these details arranged themselves into a pattern that made his blood run cold. "You're telling us you're some kind of special operations personnel whose very identity is classified?" Vale asked, her voice carrying skepticism that didn't quite mask growing uncertainty. Ember's response was silence, but her eyes held Vale's gaze with an intensity that made the lieutenant step back involuntarily. The look wasn't threatening or aggressive. It was simply the look of someone who had learned to reveal nothing while observing everything. Someone who had survived situations where the wrong word or gesture could mean death. Comprehensive insurance coverage for military contractors operating in high-risk environments required specialized policies that exceeded standard civilian protection. Advanced liability frameworks specifically designed for classified operations provided complete financial security during sensitive missions. These premium insurance packages included equipment replacement guarantees, medical treatment coverage, and legal representation that would be essential for personnel whose work involved classified activities where traditional coverage would be insufficient. The revelation of Ember's classified status created a crisis of authority in the cantina. Grimwood's entire assault had been based on the assumption that he was dealing with a fraud, someone who could be exposed and humiliated through superior knowledge and legitimate credentials. But if Ember truly was classified personnel, then his attack became something far more serious. Potentially a security violation, certainly a breach of the protocols that governed interactions with personnel whose very existence was protected information. Thornfield recognized the problem immediately. His position as senior chief gave him responsibility for maintaining discipline and protocol, but it also required him to protect operational security and classified information. The confrontation that had begun as simple barracks politics was now touching on issues that could have career-ending implications for everyone involved. "I think we need to step back and reassess this situation," Thornfield said carefully, his words chosen with the precision of someone navigating a minefield. "If we're dealing with classified personnel and operations, then this conversation needs to end right here, right now." But Grimwood's pride wouldn't allow retreat. The possibility that he had been wrong, that the small woman he had been tormenting might actually outrank him in ways that mattered, was too threatening to his self-image to accept without a fight. "This is nonsense," Grimwood declared, his voice rising with desperation disguised as anger. "You're telling me this little princess is some kind of super-secret operator? Look at her. She's 5'6" and weighs maybe 120 pounds. Real special operations personnel are warriors, fighters, people who can handle themselves in combat situations." The words were barely out of his mouth when Ember moved. The action was so subtle that most observers missed it entirely, but those with training recognized what they were seeing. In response to Grimwood's aggressive posture and raised voice, Ember had shifted her weight, adjusted her stance, and positioned herself in a way that transformed her from a small woman drinking coffee into something far more dangerous. The change was barely perceptible, but absolutely unmistakable to those who knew how to look. Knox saw it and felt his breath catch. Thornfield saw it and understood that he was no longer dealing with a simple disciplinary issue. Winchester saw it and felt his excitement grow, as his instincts about Ember were confirmed in ways that exceeded his wildest expectations. But it was Murphy who noticed the most significant detail. Behind the bar, he had a clear view of Ember's reflection in the mirror that lined the wall, and what he saw there made him forget to breathe. For just a moment, the mask of civilian contractor slipped, and he glimpsed the warrior underneath, someone who had learned to move with lethal precision, someone who had survived situations that would destroy most people, someone who was demonstrating remarkable restraint in not responding to provocation that would justify a response that could be devastating. The moment passed quickly, Ember's civilian facade settling back into place like armor that had temporarily shifted before resuming its protective function. But the brief glimpse had been enough to fundamentally alter the atmosphere in the cantina. Questions that had been theoretical became immediate and pressing. The possibility that they were dealing with genuine classified personnel became a probability that demanded careful consideration. Grimwood sensed the shift in the room's dynamics, but couldn't understand its source. His attack was losing momentum, his authority being undermined by factors he couldn't identify or combat. Desperation made him more aggressive, more willing to cross lines that should have remained inviolate. "Prove it," he demanded, stepping closer to Ember until his shadow fell across her small frame. "If you're really some kind of classified operator, prove it. Show us your credentials, demonstrate your training, give us something more than mysterious silence and classified claims." The demand hung in the air like a challenge that everyone present knew could have far-reaching consequences. Thornfield moved to intervene, recognizing that the situation was spiraling beyond his ability to control. Knox reached for his radio, understanding that higher authority needed to be notified immediately. Vale stepped back, finally grasping that she had involved herself in something far more complex and dangerous than simple barracks politics. But before anyone could act, the cantina door opened to admit a figure whose presence would change everything. Admiral Flint Caulfield entered with the bearing of someone accustomed to command at the highest levels, his eyes immediately taking in the confrontation with the kind of assessment that came from decades of leadership in the most challenging environments the military could provide. The effect of Caulfield's arrival was immediate and profound. Conversations throughout the cantina ceased as personnel recognized flag rank and responded with automatic deference. Grimwood's aggressive posture deflated as he realized that his confrontation with Ember had attracted attention at levels he hadn't anticipated and couldn't control. Vale moved toward the exit, recognizing that her participation in the confrontation could have serious career implications. But it was Ember's reaction that truly captured attention. For the first time since entering the cantina, she moved with purpose and urgency, rising from her position at the bar and turning to face the approaching Admiral. Her posture straightened to attention, her hands moved to her sides, and her entire bearing transformed from civilian contractor to military personnel awaiting orders. Caulfield's approach was measured and deliberate, his eyes taking in every detail of the scene before him. His gaze cataloged the positions of the various participants, noted the tension in the air, and settled on Ember with an intensity that made everyone present understand that something significant was about to happen. Before we reveal Ember's true identity, share this video now. The shock coming in the next few minutes will leave you speechless. Don't let your friends miss this incredible revelation. The Admiral's examination of Ember was brief but thorough, taking in her stance, her bearing, and something in her eyes that spoke of shared experiences and mutual understanding. When he spoke, his voice carried across the cantina with authority that made everyone present stand straighter. "Commander Blackwood," he said simply, the words falling into the silence like explosive charges, "I need to speak with you immediately." The title hit the assembled personnel like a physical blow. Commander. Not seaman, not petty officer, not even lieutenant, but commander. A rank that placed Ember far above most of the people who had been tormenting her. A rank that carried responsibilities and authorities they couldn't begin to imagine. Grimwood's face went white as the implications crashed over him like a tidal wave. He had been attacking a superior officer, challenging someone whose rank demanded respect and obedience, violating fundamental principles of military discipline and protocol. Vale's mouth fell open as she realized her career could be destroyed by her participation in the confrontation. Knox's hand moved toward a position of attention as training and instinct responded to the revelation of Ember's true status. But it was Winchester's reaction that captured the complexity of the moment. His face broke into a grin of pure vindication as his instincts about Ember were confirmed in ways that exceeded his wildest expectations. The small woman who had faced down an entire room of antagonists with quiet dignity was exactly what he had hoped she might be. A genuine warrior whose strength came not from size or aggression, but from competence, training, and the kind of inner steel that couldn't be faked or learned from YouTube videos. Ember's response to the Admiral's recognition was immediate and professional. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone accustomed to command responsibility. The transformation was remarkable and absolute. The vulnerable civilian contractor, who had been drinking coffee and enduring mockery, disappeared, replaced by a military officer whose presence filled the cantina with professional authority. Her posture, her bearing, her very essence had changed in response to the Admiral's acknowledgement, revealing the truth that had been hidden beneath layers of operational security and protective camouflage. Caulfield nodded once, a gesture that carried finality and authority. "We have matters to discuss that require privacy and appropriate security clearance," he said, his words chosen with the precision of someone who understood the implications of classified operations and protected information. But before they could leave, Grimwood made one final, desperate attempt to salvage his position. "Sir," he said, his voice cracking with stress and desperation, "we were just trying to protect the integrity of our service, to ensure that unauthorized personnel weren't claiming credentials they hadn't earned." Caulfield's response was to turn and look at Grimwood with an expression that carried decades of command experience and absolute authority. "Commander Blackwood's credentials are beyond question," he said simply, his words carrying weight that settled the matter with finality that brooked no argument or appeal. The Admiral's statement created a moment of absolute silence in the cantina, broken only by the distant sounds of normal base operations continuing their routine in a world that had just been fundamentally altered for everyone present. The confrontation that had begun with mockery and accusations had ended with revelations that challenged every assumption the participants had brought to the encounter. Professional military law consultation services provided essential legal protection for service members facing complex tribunal situations. Specialized military attorneys with security clearances offered comprehensive legal representation for cases involving classified operations and sensitive military matters. These legal services included tribunal defense, career protection consultation, and security clearance maintenance that would be critical for personnel whose military service involved operations requiring specialized legal expertise. The departure of Admiral Caulfield and Commander Blackwood left the cantina in a state of stunned silence that would persist long after their exit. The remaining personnel struggled to process what they had witnessed, to understand how their assumptions had been so completely wrong, to grasp the implications of what had just been revealed. Grimwood remained frozen in position, his worldview shattered by the discovery that he had spent the last hour attacking a superior officer whose rank and responsibilities exceeded his own. The realization that his actions could result in court-martial proceedings, career destruction, and personal disgrace began to settle over him like a suffocating blanket. Vile had already begun calculating the damage to her own career, understanding that her participation in the confrontation could be interpreted as a violation of military protocol, professional conduct, and basic human decency. The careful political maneuvering that had built her position could be destroyed by a single report that detailed her role in the harassment of a fellow officer. Knox found himself reviewing every moment of the encounter, understanding that his examination of classified equipment and questioning of protected personnel could have serious security implications. His 25 years of exemplary service could be overshadowed by a single incident that revealed gaps in his judgment and protocol compliance. But Winchester's reaction was entirely different. The vindication of his instincts about Ember filled him with excitement and pride that someone he had recognized as special had proven to be everything he had hoped and more. The small woman who had faced down an entire room of antagonists with quiet dignity had revealed herself to be a genuine warrior whose strength transcended physical size and conventional expectations. Thornfield began the process of damage control, understanding that the incident would require careful management to prevent wider consequences. His responsibility as senior chief included protecting his personnel from the implications of their actions, while ensuring that appropriate lessons were learned and protocols were reinforced. Murphy continued polishing glasses with mechanical precision, but his mind was focused on the remarkable woman whose presence had transformed his cantina from a simple bar into the stage for a confrontation that would be remembered and discussed for years to come. The quiet dignity she had displayed under pressure, the controlled responses to provocation, the way she had revealed her true nature only when circumstances demanded it. These qualities spoke of character that transcended rank and position. The cantina gradually began to return to normal operations, but the atmosphere had been permanently altered by what had transpired. Personnel who had witnessed the confrontation found themselves questioning their own assumptions about appearance and reality, about the wisdom of judging others based on superficial characteristics, about the complex nature of service and sacrifice in an organization that operated in shadows most civilians would never glimpse. Conversations resumed with subdued tones and careful words, as everyone present understood that they had witnessed something significant, something that challenged their fundamental beliefs about what warriors looked like and how strength was properly measured. The small woman with blue hair and civilian clothes had taught them lessons about leadership, dignity, and the power of quiet competence that would influence their thinking for years to come. As the afternoon progressed and normal routine reasserted itself, The participants in the confrontation began to understand that their lives had been changed by the encounter. Questions about their own judgment, their treatment of others, and their understanding of what it meant to serve with honor would continue to challenge them long after the immediate shock of revelation had faded. The cantina returned to its normal function as a gathering place for service members seeking relaxation and camaraderie. But the memory of Commander Ember Blackwood would linger in the minds of everyone who had witnessed her demonstration of what true strength looked like when challenged by ignorance and prejudice. Her quiet dignity in the face of provocation, her controlled responses to aggression, and her ultimate revelation of genuine authority would serve as a permanent reminder that appearances could be deeply deceiving and that real warriors came in forms that defied conventional expectations. The encounter had lasted less than an hour, but its implications would ripple through the lives and careers of everyone involved for years to come, serving as a powerful lesson about respect, judgment, and the complex nature of service in an organization where the most important battles were often fought by those whose very existence remained hidden from public view. As Admiral Caulfield and Commander Blackwood disappeared through the cantina door, the silence that followed their departure felt different from the stunned quiet that had preceded it. This wasn't the silence of shock or confusion. This was the silence of people beginning to understand that they had witnessed something far more significant than a simple case of mistaken identity. The revelation of Ember's rank had answered some questions while raising dozens of others, and the weight of those unanswered questions pressed down on the remaining personnel like atmospheric pressure before a hurricane. Grimwood stood frozen in position, his massive frame somehow diminished by the realization that he had spent the last hour attacking a superior officer. The implications crashed over him in waves: potential court-martial, career destruction, personal disgrace, the end of everything he had worked to build, over 15 years of military service. His hands trembled as he reached for his beer, but the bottle slipped from nerveless fingers to shatter on the cantina floor, the sound of breaking glass cutting through the Selanis like a gunshot. Knox found himself staring at the equipment Ember had left behind, understanding now why the modifications had seemed so sophisticated, why the communication codes had been beyond civilian access, why every piece of gear had shown signs of operational use that exceeded normal military standards. The tactical vest, the specialized radio equipment, the worn knife, these weren't props or stolen items. They were the working tools of someone whose service operated in classifications he didn't have clearance to access. But the most unsettling realization was beginning to dawn on the assembled personnel. If Admiral Caulfield had recognized Ember immediately, if her rank and credentials were beyond question, then why had she been in the cantina in the first place? Commander-level officers didn't typically spend their afternoons drinking coffee in enlisted personnel gathering places unless they had specific operational reasons that weren't immediately apparent. Vale had already begun her strategic retreat, understanding that her participation in the confrontation could have catastrophic career implications. But as she moved toward the exit, Knox's voice stopped her with words that made everyone present understand that the situation was far from resolved. "She didn't leave with her gear," Knox observed, his voice carrying undertones of growing concern. The statement hung in the air like a challenge, forcing everyone to confront the possibility that Commander Blackwood's departure with the Admiral had been temporary, that she might return to collect her equipment and continue whatever operation had brought her to their base in the first place. The tactical vest, communication equipment, and specialized gear remained at the bar, like evidence of a presence that hadn't truly departed. Murphy continued his mechanical glass polishing, but his attention was focused on the implications of what he had witnessed. 20 years of service had given him exposure to the edges of special operations, brief glimpses of personnel whose very existence was compartmentalized and protected. The quiet dignity Ember had displayed under pressure, the controlled responses to provocation, the way her entire bearing had transformed when Admiral Caulfield had acknowledged her rank. These details painted a picture of someone whose service operated in shadows most personnel would never glimpse. Winchester's excitement hadn't diminished with Ember's departure. If anything, the confirmation of his instincts about her true nature had energized him with vindication and curiosity about what might happen next. The small woman who had faced down an entire room of antagonists with quiet dignity had proven to be everything he had hoped and more, and her story was clearly far from finished. Thornfield began the complex process of damage assessment and control, understanding that the incident would require careful management to prevent wider consequences. His responsibility as senior chief included protecting his personnel while ensuring that appropriate protocols were followed and lessons were learned. But the unprecedented nature of the situation, an apparently classified operation intersecting with routine base activities, created challenges that exceeded normal disciplinary procedures. The cantina door opened again, but instead of Admiral Caulfield and Commander Blackwood returning, a different figure entered with the kind of purposeful stride that suggested official business. Lieutenant Jackson approached the group with professional bearing, his eyes taking in the scattered equipment and tense atmosphere with the assessment of someone who understood operational security and its implications. "I'm here to collect Commander Blackwood's equipment," Jackson announced, his words confirming what Knox had already suspected, "and to conduct brief interviews with personnel who had contact with her during her operation." The word operation hit the assembled personnel like a physical blow, confirming that Ember's presence in the cantina hadn't been coincidental or recreational. She had been conducting some form of classified activity, and their confrontation with her had potentially interfered with official military business at levels they couldn't begin to understand. Jackson's collection of Ember's equipment was methodical and professional, each item cataloged and secured with the kind of precision that spoke of experience with sensitive materials. But it was his announcement about interviews that truly captured everyone's attention, suggesting that their encounter with Commander Blackwood would have consequences extending far beyond the immediate embarrassment and confusion. "What kind of operation?" Grimwood asked, his voice cracking with stress and desperation. Jackson's response was immediate and final. "That information is classified above your clearance level." The words settled over the group like a blanket of implications they weren't prepared to handle. If Ember's operation was classified above their clearance levels, then their interference could be interpreted as a security violation with career-ending implications. The simple confrontation that had begun with accusations of stolen valor had evolved into something far more complex and dangerous. But before Jackson could begin his interviews, the cantina situation took another unexpected turn. The communication equipment Ember had left behind suddenly activated with a series of electronic tones that made Knox step back in alarm. The device began broadcasting what sounded like encrypted transmissions, coded messages that spoke of ongoing operations and time-sensitive communications. Jackson moved immediately to secure the equipment, but not before several personnel had heard enough to understand that whatever operation Ember was conducting was active, urgent, and requiring immediate coordination with higher authority. The radio chatter included references to extraction protocols, operational security concerns, and timeline modifications that suggested fluid, dynamic mission parameters. "Everyone step back from that equipment," Jackson ordered, his voice carrying authority that brooked no argument. "And forget whatever you just heard." But the damage was already done. The brief transmission had revealed that Commander Blackwood wasn't simply a classified officer who had been subjected to inappropriate treatment. She was actively engaged in an operation that required real-time coordination and support. Their confrontation with her hadn't just been embarrassing or inappropriate, it had potentially interfered with official military business at levels that could have national security implications. Knox found himself reviewing every moment of his interaction with Ember's equipment, understanding now that his examination could be interpreted as attempted access to classified systems and information. His 25 years of exemplary service could be overshadowed by a single incident that revealed gaps in his judgment and protocol compliance that extended far beyond simple harassment of a fellow officer. Vale's strategic retreat became more urgent as she grasped the expanding implications of her participation in the confrontation. What had begun as routine barracks politics had evolved into potential security violations, interference with classified operations, and harassment of protected personnel. Her carefully constructed career could be destroyed by reports that detailed her role in activities that might be interpreted as operationally damaging. But it was Grimwood who faced the most serious implications. His aggressive confrontation with Ember, his demands for credentials and proof of service, his physical intimidation of a superior officer conducting classified operations, these actions could result in court-martial proceedings that would end not just his career, but potentially his freedom. Jackson's interview process began with Thornfield, whose position as senior chief gave him responsibility for base discipline and protocol compliance. The conversation was conducted in low tones that didn't carry to the rest of the group, but the seriousness of Jackson's demeanor suggested that the implications of the incident extended far beyond simple disciplinary action. Advanced military communications equipment utilized quantum encryption protocols that exceeded civilian security standards by several orders of magnitude. These sophisticated systems provided real-time coordination capabilities essential for time-sensitive operations, requiring immediate response to changing tactical situations. The encryption algorithms included biometric authentication, location masking technology, and emergency override capabilities that would be critical for personnel operating in environments where communication compromise could result in mission failure or personnel casualties. While Jackson conducted his interviews, the remaining personnel in the cantina struggled to process the expanding implications of what they had witnessed. The simple confrontation that had begun with accusations and mockery had revealed layers of complexity that challenged their understanding of military operations, classified activities, and the nature of service in an organization where the most important work was often performed by people whose very existence was protected information. Murphy's perspective was unique among the witnesses, his 20 years of service having given him exposure to the edges of special operations and classified activities. The equipment modifications he had observed, the communication protocols Ember had accessed, the way she had maintained operational security while under pressure, these details painted a picture of someone whose training and experience operated at levels most personnel would never reach. Winchester's excitement had evolved into something deeper as he began to understand the true significance of what he had witnessed. The confirmation of his instincts about Ember's exceptional nature had been vindicated in ways that exceeded his wildest expectations, but the implications of her classified status raised questions about the nature of service and sacrifice that challenged his fundamental assumptions about military operations. The cantina atmosphere had been permanently altered by the incident, conversations resuming with subdued tones and careful words as everyone present understood that they had been exposed to operational realities that most personnel never encountered. The revelation that classified operations could intersect with routine base activities had shattered their sense of separation between normal military life and the shadow world of special operations. Jackson's interview with Knox was more detailed and technical, focusing on the equipment examination and the communication codes that had been accessed. The conversation revealed that Knox's professional curiosity had potentially exposed him to information above his clearance level, creating security concerns that would require careful evaluation and possible remediation. But the most significant development came when Jackson received a communication through his own encrypted device, a brief transmission that made his expression shift from professional concern to something approaching alarm. Whatever message he had received had escalated the situation beyond the parameters he had been prepared to handle. "I need to contact higher authority immediately," Jackson announced, his words carrying implications that made everyone present understand that the incident was far from resolved. Nobody leaves this area until further notice. The order transformed the cantina from a social gathering place into something resembling a containment area, with personnel restricted in their movements, while higher authority determined how to handle the security implications of the incident. The simple confrontation that had begun with accusations of stolen valor had evolved into a situation requiring intervention at levels that exceeded base command authority. Grimwood's situation had become particularly precarious as the expanding investigation focused attention on his aggressive behavior toward a superior officer conducting classified operations. His physical intimidation, demands for credentials, and general harassment could be interpreted as interference with official military business at levels that carried serious legal consequences. But the tension in the cantina reached new heights when the door opened to admit a figure whose presence immediately elevated the situation to new levels of seriousness. Captain Blake Barrington entered with the bearing of installation commander, his expression revealing the kind of professional concern that came from dealing with incidents that had implications extending far beyond routine base operations. Barrington's assessment of the situation was immediate and comprehensive, his eyes taking in the restricted personnel, the secured equipment, and the general atmosphere of tension and an uncertainty that had settled over the cantina like fog. His presence meant that the incident had attracted attention at command levels, with implications that could affect careers, operations, and possibly base security protocols. "I understand we have a situation involving classified personnel and potential security violations," Barrington said, his words carrying the authority of command and the weight of official inquiry. Jackson's brief to the captain was conducted in low tones that revealed the seriousness of the implications, without exposing classified details to personnel who lacked appropriate clearance. But the captain's reactions, the tightening around his eyes, the straightening of his posture, the way his hand moved toward his communication device, suggested that the situation had ramifications extending far beyond the immediate participants. The investigation that followed would be thorough, professional, and potentially career-ending for several of the personnel involved. But before formal proceedings could begin, the cantina situation took yet another unexpected turn that would reshape everyone's understanding of what they had witnessed and participated in. The door opened to admit Commander Ember Blackwood, but the woman who entered was dramatically different from the civilian contractor who had departed with Admiral Caulfield. She was now in full military dress uniform, her commander insignia clearly visible, her bearing reflecting the authority and responsibility of her rank. But most significantly, her left sleeve had been damaged in a way that exposed her arm from wrist to shoulder, revealing something that made every person present stop breathing. The tattoo was magnificent and terrifying in its complexity and implications. The lion's head dominated her upper arm, rendered in intricate detail with hollow eyes that seemed to stare into infinity. Above the lion, the unmistakable outline of a seal trident spread its wings with predatory grace. But this wasn't standard Navy iconography. The modifications to the design spoke of specialized units and classified operations. Below the lion, text in bold military lettering read, Alpha 7, followed by smaller designations that included dates, operational codes, and classifications that made Knox step back involuntarily. But it was the background elements of the tattoo that truly captured attention and created the silence that fell over the cantina like a physical weight. Wrapped around the lion and trident were symbols and markings that spoke of operations conducted in shadows, of missions that officially never happened, of service that existed beyond normal military recognition. The artwork was clearly not decorative. It was operational, functional, a form of identification and credentialing that carried implications beyond anything the assembled personnel had imagined possible. This is the moment you've been waiting for. Subscribe and hit that notification bell, because what you're witnessing will blow your mind. This revelation changes everything about what we thought we knew about hidden warriors. The collective gasp that rose from the assembled personnel was immediate and involuntary, the sound of people confronting evidence that shattered their fundamental assumptions about appearance, capability, and the nature of military service. Grimwood's face went white as he understood the full implications of who he had been attacking. Vale's mouth fell open as she grasped the magnitude of her misjudgment. Knox's military bearing automatically shifted to attention, as recognition of genuine authority overrode his confusion and uncertainty. But it was Winchester's reaction that captured the complexity of the moment. His face broke into a grin of pure vindication and excitement, as every instinct he had developed about Ember was confirmed in ways that exceeded his wildest expectations. The small woman who had faced down an entire room of antagonists with quiet dignity had revealed herself to be exactly what he had hoped. A genuine warrior whose strength transcended physical size and conventional expectations. Ember's entrance had been carefully orchestrated to provide maximum impact and unmistakable clarification of her status and authority. The damaged sleeve wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate revelation designed to eliminate any remaining doubt about her credentials while demonstrating the operational nature of her service. The tattoo served as both identification and credentialing, a form of documentation that couldn't be faked or replicated. "I believe there were questions about my qualifications," Ember said, her voice carrying the authority of rank and the weight of operational experience. "I trust this clarifies any remaining concerns." The words fell into the silence like stones into still water, creating ripples of implication that spread outward to touch everyone present. The revelation of the tattoo had answered questions while raising others, confirmed suspicions while creating new mysteries, and fundamentally altered the dynamics of every relationship in the room. Captain Barrington's reaction was immediate and professional. His military bearing shifted to acknowledge Ember's rank and status, his expression revealing the kind of recognition that came from familiarity with classified operations and protected personnel. "Commander, I apologize for any interference with your operation," he said formally. "We will ensure appropriate protocols are followed going forward." But Ember's response revealed that the situation was more complex than a simple case of mistaken identity and inappropriate treatment. The interference was minimal and actually provided valuable intelligence about base security awareness and response protocols, she said, her words suggesting that the confrontation had been not just endured, but utilized as part of her operational objectives. The implication that their harassment and confrontation had somehow served Ember's purposes created a new level of confusion and uncertainty among the assembled personnel. Had she allowed herself to be subjected to their aggression as part of some larger operational goal? Had their behavior been observed, evaluated, and incorporated into whatever mission she was conducting? Knox found himself reviewing every moment of the encounter from this new perspective, understanding that his examination of her equipment, his technical challenges, his growing suspicion and recognition, all of these reactions had potentially been anticipated, monitored, and evaluated as part of operational intelligence gathering. The realization that he had been unknowingly participating in some form of assessment or evaluation added new layers of complexity to his understanding of what had transpired. Vale's strategic retreat had been halted by Captain Barrington's order that no one leave the area, but the revelation of Ember's true status and operational purpose had transformed her concern from career damage control to something approaching existential crisis. If her participation in the confrontation had been observed and evaluated as part of a classified operation, then the implications for her future service could extend far beyond simple disciplinary action. Grimwood's situation had evolved from potentially career-ending to something that might require legal representation and formal defense. His aggressive confrontation with a superior officer conducting classified operations had crossed lines that carried implications he was only beginning to understand. The physical intimidation, the demands for proof, the general harassment, these actions could be interpreted as interference with national security operations. But the most significant revelation came when Ember addressed the group directly, her words carrying implications that would reshape their understanding of military service and operational reality. Your reactions and responses provided valuable data about how classified personnel are perceived and treated when operating without visible indicators of status or authority, she said. This information will be incorporated into training protocols and security procedures. The statement confirmed that their encounter with Ember had been not just endured, but actively utilized as part of operational intelligence gathering. Their assumptions, prejudices, and behavioral patterns had been observed, cataloged, and evaluated as part of some larger assessment of base security culture and awareness. The confrontation that had felt personal and immediate had actually been professional and operational. Specialized tactical gear authentication systems required advanced verification protocols that exceeded standard military identification procedures. These sophisticated recognition systems incorporated biometric scanning, encrypted digital signatures, and multi-factor authentication that would be essential for personnel operating in classified environments where standard identification could be compromised or insufficient. The authentication protocols included visual verification methods, secure communication channels, and emergency override capabilities that would be critical for maintaining operational security during sensitive missions. Winchester's excitement had evolved into something deeper as he began to understand that his recognition of Ember's exceptional nature had been correct in ways that exceeded his initial assessment. She wasn't just a warrior who had been underestimated. She was an operator whose very presence in the cantina had served operational purposes that none of them had suspected. His instincts about her had been vindicated, but the implications of her mission raised questions about the nature of assessment and evaluation that he hadn't considered. Murphy's perspective continued to be unique among the witnesses, his experience with the edges of special operations providing context for understanding what they were observing. The equipment modifications, the communication protocols, the operational tattoo, these elements painted a picture of service that operated in classifications and environments that most personnel would never access. The revelation that routine base activities could be subject to this kind of assessment and evaluation had profound implications for everyone's understanding of privacy and operational security. Thornfield's role as senior chief had been complicated by the revelation that his base personnel had been subjects of classified assessment without their knowledge or consent. His responsibility for maintaining discipline and protocol now extended to managing the implications of operations that existed beyond normal command structures and oversight. The intersection of routine military life with classified assessment represented challenges that weren't covered in standard leadership training. Jackson's interview process had been overtaken by events that exceeded his initial mandate and authority. The revelation of Ember's operational purpose had transformed a simple incident investigation into something requiring coordination with higher authority and specialized oversight. His role had evolved from fact-finding to damage assessment and operational continuity management. But the situation took another dramatic turn when Ember's communication device activated with the same electronic tones they had heard earlier, but now the urgency of the transmission was unmistakable. The encrypted messages flowing through the quantum encrypted channels painted a picture of a situation that was deteriorating rapidly and requiring immediate response. Operation Nightfall has been compromised, Ember announced after reviewing the transmission, her words carrying implications that extended far beyond the cantina and base operations. 3 operatives are missing, and extraction protocols have been activated. The revelation that Ember's assessment mission was connected to a larger operation that was now compromised created new levels of urgency and concern. The simple confrontation in the cantina had evolved into a connection point for operational activities that had national security implications extending far beyond routine base activities. Captain Barrington's response was immediate and professional. "What support do you require, Commander?" he asked, his question acknowledging both her authority and the seriousness of the operational situation. Ember's answer revealed the true scope of what they had been witnessing. "I need immediate access to my real team and authorization for extraction operations that will require complete operational autonomy," she said, her words carrying implications that made everyone present understand they had been exposed to realities far beyond their normal experience. The transformation in Ember's demeanor was remarkable and complete. The civilian contractor, who had endured harassment with quiet dignity, had evolved into a military commander whose authority and responsibility operated at levels that exceeded most personnel's clearance and understanding. Her bearing, her voice, her very presence had shifted to accommodate operational requirements that demanded immediate action and unquestioned authority. "Your assessment data will be invaluable for future security protocols," Ember told the assembled personnel, her words providing closure to their role in her mission while acknowledging that their behavior had served operational purposes beyond their understanding. "The responses observed here will influence training and awareness programs throughout the command structure." The statement provided context for their experience while raising questions about the extent of assessment and evaluation activities that operated beyond normal awareness and consent. The realization that routine interactions could be subject to operational analysis had profound implications for everyone's understanding of privacy and security in military environments. Vale's concern had evolved beyond career implications to questions about the nature of service and assessment that challenged her fundamental assumptions about military operations. If classified personnel could operate in environments where they were subject to harassment and evaluation without protection or support, then the implications for all service members were significant and troubling. Knox's technical expertise had been utilized in ways he hadn't recognized, his examination of equipment and communication systems providing operational intelligence that had served purposes beyond his understanding. The realization that his professional curiosity had been incorporated into classified assessment created new appreciation for the complexity of operational security and intelligence gathering. Grimwood's situation remained the most serious among the assembled personnel, his aggressive behavior toward a superior officer conducting classified operations having crossed multiple lines with implications that would require formal resolution. But the revelation that his actions had been observed and evaluated as part of operational assessment provided new context for understanding the consequences he would face. Comprehensive threat assessment protocols utilized real-time intelligence gathering that exceeded standard security procedures by incorporating behavioral analysis, response pattern recognition, and psychological profiling capabilities. These advanced assessment systems provided dynamic threat evaluation that would be essential for identifying security vulnerabilities and developing countermeasures appropriate for classified operational environments where standard protection protocols would be insufficient for maintaining personnel safety and mission security. Winchester's vindication continued to grow as he understood that his recognition of Ember's exceptional nature had been accurate in ways that exceeded his wildest expectations. She wasn't just a warrior who had been underestimated. She was an operational commander whose mission parameters included assessment and evaluation activities that operated at levels he was only beginning to comprehend. Murphy's role as witness to the encounter had provided him with unique insight into operational activities that most personnel never observed. His 20 years of experience with the edges of special operations had prepared him to recognize significance in details others missed. But the scope of what he had witnessed exceeded even his understanding of classified activities and their implications. Thornfield's responsibilities had expanded beyond routine discipline and protocol management to include coordination with operational activities that existed beyond normal command structures. His role as senior chief now included ensuring that base personnel understood and complied with security requirements that extended far beyond their normal awareness and training. The cantina had been transformed from a simple gathering place into a connection point for operational activities that had national security implications. The revelation that classified operations could intersect with routine base activities in ways that served assessment and intelligence-gathering purposes had permanently altered everyone's understanding of military service and operational reality. But the most significant development came when Ember received another transmission that made her expression shift from operational focus to something approaching alarm. The message was brief but obviously urgent, and her response revealed the true scope of the crisis she was managing. "The compromise extends beyond initial assessment," she announced, her words carrying implications that made Captain Barrington step forward with obvious concern. "Multiple operational cells have been affected, and the extraction requirements have escalated beyond current resource allocation." The revelation that Operation Nightfall represented a broader security compromise with implications extending far beyond the immediate extraction requirements created new levels of urgency and concern. The situation had evolved from classified assessment to active crisis management requiring resources and authority at levels that exceeded base capabilities. Barrington's response demonstrated the kind of professional competence that had earned him installation command. "All base resources are at your disposal, Commander," he said formally. "What do you need?" Ember's answer revealed the complexity of operational requirements that extended far beyond normal military activities. "I need secure communication with Pentagon operations, immediate transportation assets, and authorization for activities that will require complete operational autonomy," she said, her words carrying implications that made everyone present understand they were witnessing the intersection of routine military life with operational realities that most personnel never encountered. The transformation of the cantina situation from harassment incident to operational crisis demonstrated the complex nature of military service in an organization where classified activities could intersect with routine operations in ways that served purposes beyond normal understanding. The personnel who had participated in the confrontation with Ember had unknowingly been exposed to operational realities that would influence their understanding of service and security for the rest of their careers. Jackson's role had evolved from simple investigation to coordination with operational activities that required specialized oversight and security clearance. His initial mandate to conduct interviews and assess security implications had been overtaken by events that exceeded his authority and required coordination with higher command levels. The interviews that followed would be conducted by personnel with appropriate clearance and authority to handle information related to classified operations and their implications. The simple confrontation that had begun with accusations of stolen valor had evolved into a complex intersection of routine military life with operational activities that operated in classifications most personnel would never access. Vile's strategic considerations had expanded beyond career protection to questions about the nature of service in an organization where assessment and evaluation could occur without awareness or consent. The implications of her participation in harassment of classified personnel extended beyond disciplinary action to questions about judgment, character, and fitness for continued service in environments where operational security was paramount. Knox's technical expertise would be valuable in the ongoing investigation and assessment of security implications, but his exposure to classified equipment and communication systems had created clearance concerns that would require formal resolution. His 25 years of exemplary service provided foundation for positive resolution, but the incident had exposed gaps in security awareness that needed to be addressed. Grimwood's situation remained the most serious and complex, his aggressive behavior toward a superior officer conducting classified operations having created legal implications that would require formal proceedings and possible court-martial. The revelation that his actions had been observed and evaluated as part of operational assessment provided context, but didn't diminish the seriousness of his violations of military protocol and professional conduct. But the most significant long-term implication of the incident was the revelation that classified operations could intersect with routine military life in ways that served assessment and intelligence-gathering purposes. The Cantina confrontation had provided operational intelligence about base security culture, awareness levels, and response protocols that would influence training and security procedures throughout the command structure. Winchester's role as the one person who had recognized Ember's exceptional nature from the beginning provided valuable insight into the assessment process and its objectives. His instincts about her had been vindicated in ways that exceeded his expectations, but the implications of operational assessment raised questions about the nature of evaluation and its purposes that challenged his understanding of military service. Murphy's perspective as bartender and witness had given him unique exposure to operational activities that most personnel never observed. His 20 years of experience with the edges of special operations had prepared him to recognize significance in details others missed, but the scope of what he had witnessed provided new understanding of the complexity and pervasiveness of classified activities within routine military operations. The Cantina would return to its normal function as a gathering place for base personnel, but the memory of the incident would serve as a permanent reminder that appearances could be deeply deceiving and that operational realities existed beyond normal awareness and understanding. The simple confrontation had revealed layers of complexity in military service that challenged fundamental assumptions about security, assessment, and the nature of classified operations. Professional cybersecurity consultation services provided essential protection for military installations facing sophisticated electronic warfare threats that exceeded standard defensive capabilities. Advanced network security protocols designed specifically for classified communication systems offered comprehensive protection against infiltration attempts that could compromise operational security. These specialized security services included real-time threat monitoring, intrusion detection capabilities, and emergency response protocols that would be critical for maintaining communication integrity during sensitive operations, where standard civilian security would be completely inadequate. The long-term consequences of the incident would ripple through the careers and lives of everyone involved, serving as a powerful lesson about judgment, assumption, and the complex nature of service in an organization where the most important work was often performed by people whose very existence remained hidden from public view. The encounter had demonstrated that real strength came not from size or aggression, but from competence, training, and the kind of inner steel that couldn't be faked or learned from external sources. Ember's preparation for departure involved coordination with operational assets that existed beyond normal base resources and authority. Her transformation from civilian contractor to operational commander had revealed the complexity of military service in an organization where classified activities intersected with routine operations in ways that served purposes beyond normal understanding. The personnel who had witnessed the encounter would carry its lessons for the rest of their careers, understanding that their assumptions about appearance and capability had been challenged in ways that fundamentally altered their perspective on leadership, strength, and the nature of military service. The small woman with blue hair and civilian clothes had taught them profound lessons about dignity, competence, and the power of quiet authority that transcended rank and position. Captain Barrington's coordination with higher authority would ensure that the operational requirements were met while managing the security implications of the incident in ways that protected both personnel and mission objectives. His leadership in navigating the complex intersection of routine base operations with classified activities demonstrated the kind of professional competence required for command positions in environments where multiple operational realities existed simultaneously. The investigation and assessment process that followed would be comprehensive and professional, designed to extract maximum value from the incident while protecting operational security and personnel welfare. The lessons learned would influence training protocols, security procedures, and awareness programs throughout the military structure, serving as a case study in the complex dynamics of classified operations and their intersection with routine military life. Vale's career would survive the incident, but the experience would fundamentally alter her approach to leadership and her understanding of the complex nature of military service. The revelation that her assumptions about other personnel could be so completely wrong had provided valuable lessons about judgment, humility, and the importance of treating all service members with respect and dignity regardless of their apparent status or role. Knox's technical expertise would be valuable in ongoing security assessments and protocol development, his experience with the incident providing insight into equipment recognition and communication security that would benefit the entire command structure. His 25 years of service had been enhanced rather than diminished by the encounter, which had demonstrated both his professional competence and his capacity for learning and growth. Grimwood's resolution would be more complex and potentially career-ending, but the process would be fair and professional, taking into account his service record, the circumstances of the incident, and the potential for rehabilitation and continued service. The revelation that his actions had served operational purposes didn't excuse his behavior, but provided context for understanding its implications and consequences. Winchester's vindication would serve as a career-defining moment, demonstrating his ability to recognize exceptional personnel and his commitment to fairness and dignity in treatment of all service members. His instincts about Ember had been proven correct in ways that exceeded his expectations, providing foundation for continued growth and development in leadership roles. Murphy's perspective would be valuable in ongoing assessments of base culture and security awareness. His unique position as witness to routine interactions providing insight into personnel behavior and attitudes that influenced operational security and mission effectiveness. His 20 years of experience had been enhanced by exposure to operational realities that most personnel never encountered. Thornfield's leadership during the incident had demonstrated the kind of professional competence required for senior enlisted positions in environments where routine operations could intersect with classified activities in ways that required immediate adaptation and response. His ability to maintain discipline and protocol while accommodating operational requirements had been exemplary and would serve as a model for future situations. The cantina's atmosphere had been permanently altered by the incident, but the change represented growth and increased awareness rather than damage or disruption. The personnel who frequented the establishment now understood that their base operated in a complex environment where classified activities could intersect with routine operations in ways that served purposes beyond their normal awareness. The broader implications of the incident extended beyond the immediate participants to influence training programs, security protocols, and awareness initiatives throughout the military structure. The lessons learned about assumption, judgment, and the complex nature of classified operations would benefit the entire organization and contribute to improved operational security and personnel welfare. But as the immediate crisis management concluded and normal operations began to resume, the most significant revelation came in Ember's final communication with the assembled personnel. Your participation in this assessment has contributed to operational security improvements that will protect personnel and missions for years to come, she said, her words providing closure while acknowledging the value of their unwitting contribution. The statement provided context for understanding how their harassment and confrontation had served operational purposes beyond their awareness, transforming what had felt like personal failure into valuable contribution to organizational improvement. The realization that their behavior had been observed, evaluated, and utilized for constructive purposes provided new perspective on the incident and its implications. If this story gave you chills, you need to see our next video about a female Marine who shocked an entire battalion. Click here to watch that incredible story unfold. As Ember prepared for final departure, the communication device activated one last time with transmissions that revealed the scope and urgency of Operation Nightfall. The encrypted messages flowing through quantum-secured channels painted a picture of global operational activities that extended far beyond base operations and local assessment activities. The extraction operation is authorized, came the transmission that would reshape everyone's understanding of what they had witnessed. Alpha Team 7 is cleared for immediate deployment with full operational autonomy. The revelation that Ember commanded Alpha Team 7 provided final context for the lion tattoo and its significance. The designation represented not just individual service, but team leadership in operations that existed at the highest levels of classification and importance. The small woman who had endured harassment with quiet dignity was revealed to be a commander whose responsibilities extended to global operational activities with national security implications. Her final words to the assembled personnel carried weight that would influence their understanding of service and sacrifice for the rest of their careers. "Real strength doesn't require recognition or acknowledgement," she said simply. "It exists in service that remains hidden, in sacrifice that goes unrecognized, in warriors who protect freedom without seeking glory or reward." The message resonated through the cantina like a bell tolling, providing philosophical foundation for understanding not just Ember's service, but the broader nature of military duty and responsibility. The revelation that the most important battles were often fought by people whose very existence remained classified had profound implications for everyone's understanding of service and sacrifice. As Ember disappeared through the cantina door for the final time, the silence that followed was different from any that had preceded it. This was the silence of people who had been exposed to operational realities that exceeded their previous understanding, who had witnessed service and sacrifice at levels they hadn't known existed, who had learned profound lessons about assumption, judgment, and the complex nature of strength and authority. The equipment collection was complete, the interviews concluded, the assessment data compiled and transmitted to higher authority for analysis and implementation. The simple confrontation that had begun with accusations of stolen valor had evolved into a comprehensive evaluation of base security culture with implications extending throughout the military structure. But the most lasting impact of the incident would be personal and individual, as each participant carried forward lessons about dignity, respect, and the importance of treating all personnel with the consideration and honor they deserved as fellow servants of their nation. The small woman with blue hair and civilian clothes had taught them that real warriors came in forms that defied conventional expectations, and that true strength was measured not by size or aggression, but by competence, character, and commitment to service above self. The cantina returned to its normal function as a gathering place for base personnel, but the conversations would be different now, informed by new understanding of the complex realities that existed beyond normal awareness and experience. The incident had provided a window into operational activities that most personnel would never encounter, revealing the depth and complexity of military service in ways that fundamentally altered everyone's perspective. Winchester's excitement had evolved into something deeper and more meaningful, as he understood that his recognition of Ember's exceptional nature had been vindicated in ways that provided foundation for his own growth and development as a leader. His instincts about character and capability had been proven correct, providing confidence for future assessments and interactions with personnel whose true nature might not be immediately apparent. Murphy's role as witness and observer had given him unique insight into the intersection of routine military life with operational activities that existed in classifications beyond normal access. His 20 years of experience had been enhanced by exposure to realities that would influence his understanding of service and security for the rest of his career. The long-term implications of Operation Nightfall would remain classified, but the personnel who had witnessed its intersection with routine base operations would carry forward understanding of the complexity and importance of activities that existed beyond their normal awareness. The revelation that global security operations could touch their daily lives in ways they hadn't suspected had provided new appreciation for the scope and significance of military service. As the day progressed and normal routine reasserted itself, the participants in the confrontation began to process the full implications of what they had experienced. The simple encounter had revealed layers of complexity in military service that challenged fundamental assumptions about security, assessment, and the nature of classified operations. The lessons learned would influence their approach to leadership, judgment, and interaction with fellow personnel for the rest of their careers. The cantina's transformation from harassment incident to operational assessment to crisis management had demonstrated the unpredictable nature of military service in an organization where routine activities could intersect with classified operations in ways that served purposes beyond normal understanding. The personnel who had participated in the encounter had been exposed to operational realities that would influence their understanding of service and sacrifice for years to come. But perhaps the most significant lesson of the entire incident was the demonstration that real strength and authority didn't require external validation or recognition. Ember's quiet dignity under pressure, her controlled responses to harassment, and her ultimate revelation of genuine competence and responsibility had provided a masterclass in leadership that transcended rank and position. The small woman who had entered the cantina as an apparent civilian contractor and departed as a recognized operational commander had taught everyone present that appearances could be profoundly deceiving, that assumptions were dangerous and often wrong, and that true warriors came in forms that defied conventional expectations. Her service existed in shadows that protected freedom and security in ways that would never receive public recognition or acknowledgement. But her sacrifice and dedication were no less real or valuable for their hidden nature. As the sun set over the naval base and normal evening routines began, the cantina settled into its familiar rhythm of conversation and camaraderie. But the memory of Commander Ember Blackwood would linger in the minds of everyone who had witnessed her demonstration of what quiet strength looked like when challenged by ignorance and prejudice. Her legacy would continue to influence their understanding of leadership, dignity, and the complex nature of service in an organization where the most important battles were often fought by those whose very existence remained hidden from public view. The incident had lasted only a few hours, but its implications would ripple through the lives and careers of everyone involved for years to come, serving as a permanent reminder that real warriors came in all forms and that true strength was measured not by appearance or aggression, but by competence, character, and unwavering commitment to service above self. The lessons learned in that cantina would influence military culture and training for generations, demonstrating the power of individual dignity and quiet competence to transform understanding and create lasting change. And somewhere in the shadows of classified operations, Commander Ember Blackwood continued her service, protecting freedom and security in ways that would never receive recognition but were no less vital for their hidden nature. Her work continued in the margins of public awareness, where real warriors fought real battles to preserve the liberty and safety that others took for granted. Their sacrifice measured not in public acknowledgement, but in lives protected and threats neutralized through competence, dedication, and the kind of quiet courage that defined true strength. The story of her brief appearance in that cantina would become legend among those who witnessed it. A reminder that heroes came in unexpected forms and that the most important service was often performed by those whose very existence remained classified. Her legacy would continue to inspire and challenge, demonstrating that real leadership transcended appearance and that true authority came not from rank or position, but from competence, character, and unwavering commitment to the mission and the people it protected. The weeks following Commander Blackwood's departure brought changes to Coronado Naval Base that rippled through every aspect of daily operations, like stones thrown into still water. The official report classified the incident as a routine security assessment with satisfactory personnel response protocols, but those words carried weight that pressed down on everyone who had witnessed the truth of what had transpired in the Anchor Bar that afternoon. Grimwood's court-martial proceedings began 3 weeks later in a sterile conference room that smelled of fresh paint and broken dreams. The charges were extensive: conduct unbecoming an officer, harassment of superior personnel, interference with classified operations, and violation of operational security protocols. His defense attorney, a sharp-eyed captain with 20 years of military law experience, had reviewed the case files with growing pessimism. Commander Blackwood's testimony will be devastating, the attorney explained during their final preparation meeting. She's documented every interaction, every response, every violation of protocol. The operational assessment data shows that your behavior compromised mission objectives and endangered personnel's safety. But Grimwood's punishment, when it came, carried unexpected elements of mercy wrapped in professional destruction. His rank was reduced to lieutenant, his security clearance permanently revoked, and his assignment changed to logistics coordination at a remote supply depot in Alaska. The career he had built over 15 years of service was effectively over, but he retained his pension and benefits, a consideration that spoke to institutional recognition of the incident's complex nature. The most difficult part of his sentencing wasn't the professional consequences, but the mandatory counseling sessions designed to address the underlying attitudes and assumptions that had led to his behavior. Week after week, he sat across from Dr. Sage Whitmore, a Navy psychiatrist whose quiet competence reminded him uncomfortably of Commander Blackwood's controlled dignity under pressure. Your reaction to her presence revealed deep-seated beliefs about authority, competence, and who deserves respect, Dr. Whitmore observed during one particularly difficult session. These attitudes didn't develop overnight, and changing them will require honest self-examination and sustained effort. The process was grueling and humbling, forcing Grimwood to confront aspects of his character that he had never questioned. His assumptions about leadership, his definitions of strength, his unconscious biases about gender and authority, all of these foundations of his worldview had been shattered by an encounter with a small woman whose quiet competence had revealed the poverty of his understanding. Knox's experience had been markedly different, but no less transformative. His technical expertise and 25 years of exemplary service had protected him from serious disciplinary action, but the incident had fundamentally altered his understanding of operational security and assessment protocols. His new assignment as base security coordinator came with expanded responsibilities and access to classified information that provided context for what he had witnessed. The equipment modifications he had examined in Ember's gear, the communication protocols she had accessed, the operational tattoo that had revealed her true status. These elements now made sense within a broader framework of special operations and classified activities that he had previously only glimpsed from the periphery. His role in the ongoing security assessment implementation gave him unique insight into how the incident was being used to improve protocols throughout the command structure. The data collected during Commander Blackwood's assessment has identified 17 separate security vulnerabilities, Knox reported during a classified briefing to base leadership. Her recommendations include enhanced awareness training, modified equipment protocols, and improved recognition procedures for classified personnel operating undercover. The irony wasn't lost on him that his harassment of a superior officer had contributed to operational improvements that would protect future personnel and missions. The lesson about unintended consequences and the complex nature of assessment and evaluation would influence his approach to security for the rest of his career. Vale's resolution had been swift and decisive, her transfer to a Pentagon staff position representing both punishment and opportunity. The assignment removed her from operational environments where her judgment could endanger personnel, but it also provided access to policy development and administrative responsibilities that could shape future protocols and training programs. Her work on the sexual harassment and assault response and prevention program had taken on new urgency and focus following her experience with Commander Blackwood. The revelation that her own behavior could be interpreted as harassment and discrimination had forced her to confront aspects of military culture that she had previously accepted without question. The incident at Coronado demonstrates how quickly routine interactions can escalate into harassment situations, Vale wrote in a policy memo that would influence training programs throughout the Navy. The intersection of gender bias, authority assumptions, and operational security creates vulnerabilities that require comprehensive address through education and cultural change. Her transformation from perpetrator to advocate represented the kind of personal growth that institutional change required, though the process had been painful and humbling in ways that would influence her understanding of leadership for the rest of her career. Winchester's vindication had been complete and professionally rewarding, his recognition of Commander Blackwood's exceptional nature earning him commendation and advancement opportunities that accelerated his career trajectory. His assignment to Officer Candidate School as an instructor provided platform for sharing the lessons learned from the incident with future military leaders. Real leadership isn't about size, gender, or conventional indicators of authority, Winchester told his students during orientation sessions that had become legendary for their impact on officer development. It's about competence, character, and the ability to maintain dignity under pressure. The most important lesson I ever learned came from watching a small woman with blue hair teach an entire room of experienced personnel what quiet strength looked like. His story of the Cantina incident had become required curriculum in leadership development programs, though the classified details remained protected, and the focus stayed on the human elements of assumption, judgment, and recognition of exceptional personnel. The experience had provided foundation for his own growth as a leader and educator, demonstrating how individual encounters could influence understanding and create lasting change. Murphy's perspective had been sought by investigators, researchers, and policy developers interested in understanding how routine military environments could be utilized for operational assessment and intelligence gathering. His 20 years of experience with the edges of special operations had provided unique insight into the intersection of classified activities with normal base operations. She knew exactly what she was doing from the moment she walked through that door, Murphy reflected during one of many interviews conducted by personnel studying the incident. Every response was calculated, every reaction was monitored, every interaction served operational purposes that none of us suspected. His cantina had been selected for renovation and expansion, officially as part of routine infrastructure improvement, but actually as recognition of its role in operational assessment and training activities. The new facility would include enhanced monitoring capabilities and assessment protocols that could be activated when classified personnel required evaluation of base security culture and awareness levels. Thornfield's leadership during the crisis had earned him promotion to Master Chief and assignment to special operations support activities that provided broader platform for implementing lessons learned from the incident. His ability to maintain discipline and protocol while accommodating operational requirements had demonstrated the kind of senior enlisted leadership that special operations required. The intersection of routine military life with classified operations represents challenges that require adaptive leadership and institutional flexibility. Thornfield observed during professional development seminars that had become models for senior enlisted education. Our response to unexpected situations reveals character and competence in ways that formal evaluations cannot measure. His implementation of new security awareness and recognition protocols throughout the Pacific Fleet had been informed by direct experience with the complex dynamics of classified assessment and operational security. The lessons learned from the Cantina incident had been systematized and incorporated into training programs that would benefit the entire military structure. Lieutenant Decker Sterling's role in the investigation and assessment had evolved into permanent assignment with operational security and intelligence activities that existed at the intersection of routine military operations and classified assessment. His experience with the incident had provided valuable insight into how routine interactions could be utilized for operational intelligence and security evaluation. The interview protocols he had developed following the Blackwood incident had been adopted throughout the special operations community as standard procedures for managing security incidents involving classified personnel. His work had contributed to improved protection of operational security while maintaining the flexibility required for assessment and intelligence gathering activities. Dr. Whitmore's involvement in the counseling and rehabilitation aspects of the incident had led to broader responsibilities for developing psychological support programs for personnel involved in classified assessment and operational activities. Her work with Grimwood and other affected personnel had provided insight into the psychological impacts of exposure to operational realities beyond normal military experience. The revelation that routine interactions can serve classified assessment purposes creates unique psychological challenges for personnel who discover they have been subjects of evaluation, Dr. Whitmore reported in professional publications that had influenced military psychology practices. Support programs must address both the immediate shock of discovery and the longer-term implications for trust and institutional relationships. Her research on the psychological dynamics of classified assessment had become foundational literature for military psychology programs, providing framework for understanding and supporting personnel exposed to operational realities that existed beyond their normal awareness and understanding. Captain Barrington's management of the incident had demonstrated the kind of installation command competence required when routine base operations intersected with classified activities and national security operations. His coordination with higher authority and support for operational requirements had served as a model for base commanders throughout the military structure. The protocol improvements implemented at Coronado following the incident had been studied and adopted by installations worldwide, creating standardized procedures for managing the intersection of routine military life with classified assessment and operational activities. The lessons learned had contributed to improved security and operational effectiveness throughout the command structure. But perhaps the most significant long-term impact of the incident had been its influence on military culture and attitudes toward diversity, inclusion, and recognition of exceptional personnel, regardless of their apparent status or conventional indicators of authority. The story of Commander Blackwood's assessment had become legendary within special operations communities, serving as a powerful reminder that real warriors came in forms that defied conventional expectations. Training programs throughout the military had incorporated elements of the incident into curricula designed to address assumption, bias, and the importance of treating all personnel with respect and dignity. The lessons learned had influenced everything from basic training protocols to senior leadership development programs, creating cultural change that extended far beyond the immediate participants. The operational improvements resulting from Commander Blackwood's assessment had enhanced security and effectiveness throughout the special operations community, her recommendations having been implemented across multiple commands and operational environments. The data collected during the Cantina incident had contributed to better protection of classified personnel and improved operational security protocols. But the human impact of the encounter continued to resonate through the lives of everyone who had witnessed it, serving as a permanent reminder that strength came in many forms and that true leadership transcended appearance, rank, and conventional expectations. The small woman with blue hair who had faced down a room full of antagonists with quiet dignity had taught lessons about character and competence that would influence military culture for generations. As months passed and the immediate shock of the incident faded into memory, the participants found themselves changed in ways both subtle and profound. Their understanding of leadership, their approach to judgment and assumption, their recognition of the complex nature of military service, all of these fundamental aspects of their professional identity had been influenced by an encounter that had lasted only a few hours, but would affect them for the rest of their careers. The Cantina continued to serve as a gathering place for base personnel, but conversations now carried awareness of the operational realities that existed beyond normal experience. The incident had provided a window into classified activities and assessment protocols that most personnel would never encounter, creating appreciation for the complexity and importance of service that remained hidden from public view. Commander Blackwood's legacy continued to influence military culture and operations through the personnel she had affected, the protocols she had improved, and the lessons she had taught about dignity, competence, and the true nature of strength. Her brief appearance in that cantina had created ripples of change that would continue to spread throughout the military structure, demonstrating the power of individual encounters to transform understanding and create lasting institutional improvement. Years later, when new personnel arrived at Coronado and heard whispered stories about the small woman with blue hair who had once walked into the Anchor Bar and changed everything, they would understand that they were hearing more than military legend. They were learning about the complex nature of service in an organization where the most important battles were fought by people whose very existence remained classified, where real strength required no external validation, and where true warriors served in shadows that protected freedom in ways the public would never know or acknowledge. The legacy of that afternoon continued to influence every aspect of base operations, from security protocols to cultural awareness programs, from leadership development to operational assessment procedures. Commander Ember Blackwood had demonstrated that individual encounters could reshape institutional understanding and create lasting change that extended far beyond the immediate participants, proving that real warriors came in forms that challenged every conventional expectation and assumption about strength, authority, and the true meaning of military service.